like we're in a UFC event or something.
Is he the get ready?
We are live.
Okay.
That's his brother Michael, who does the Let's Get Ready to Rumble.
Ready to rumble.
That's his brother who does boxing. Yeah. Then Bruce Buffer does the UFC announcements.
What a great family business.
It's really an interesting story. I don't know a ton about them, but the fact that two brothers have made their multi-millionaires from their voices, that's interesting in and of itself.
And are they doing voiceovers and those types of things? I know the Get Ready to Rumble guy has been in some commercials and different things, but you know, it's kind of a parody for what he does.
Yeah,
but it's
yeah,
like,
I'm
do
sure.
they just do sporting events, or is there like, oh yeah, we played that cartoon character?
Yeah, I don't know. I know they've made, you know, movie appearances and stuff like that. So, and I know, I'm sure Bruce Buffer licenses his voice in like the UFC video games and stuff like that, I would guess. Fascinating. It's fascinating. You can turn almost anything into a business potentially.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating, the people who make it and the people who don't. It's like, it's not the thing, it's the people. And that's an interesting thing in and of itself.
Well, and even John Assaraf, when he talks about, you know, his story about how he got, what was he, 1920 or so, was kind of going down the wrong road and all of that. And then I think it was his brother introduced him to a gentleman in real estate and said, you need to go work for this guy. And it was this gentleman that he started working for in real estate that had him visualize, really define what he wanted. And, you know, initially John was like, you mean like this weekend? I want to go party and, you know, hopefully meet a chick or something. That's, you know, that's my life goal right now. The guy's like, no. You know, let's
big goals here, man.
Big goals. So you fast forward, and John Assaraf has his own real estate company now, very successful. He didn't know if he was just a one-off, if it was just an anomaly, or if what this gentleman had him do was legit, like, you know, could it just work on anyone? And so he ended up doing a program for his real estate agents. So, you know, at this point, he's got a big corporation. He's got hundreds of real estate agents. And so he does the program. And one of the interesting parts was that he found interesting. He goes, some of the smartest people that he thought would just take this and run with it and be hugely successful were not. Some of the guys that he was a little concerned about, like, you know, are they going to get this? Are they going to be okay with it? They took this information and like 10 times their income by doing it. So it's interesting, like, can being too smart get in your way sometimes?
100%. Being too smart can absolutely get in your way. And I think it usually comes with some hidden or secret perfectionism or expectations, which is part of it. But
yes,
there's a topic for another day.
Welcome everybody. Welcome to the No Fucks Given podcast. I'm Ryan, and that's my buddy Will over there. And today, good morning. A little foggy down there, I imagine. It was a little foggy up here in NorCal.
Is it? Actually, it was it's sunny, not super sunny, but it's nice out here. No, I think we're bracing for some rain everywhere though coming up.
Yeah. No, I did a walk. It was really foggy out, and it was extra cold because there's a lot of moisture in the air. So I just figured,
give me back my San Francisco weather, man.
Yeah, you can have it. You
don't like it, give it back.
Feel free. All right, looks like all the pre-show checks checked. We're actually streaming the second week to Facebook without a problem. Woohoo!
Hey, look at that.
I am excited about that. Today,
the little things in life.
it is the little things in life. Yes, if we can find more of those moments and appreciate them, it's amazing what a different perspective we can have on life itself. And I was watching a video, and I wish I could remember the name of the country. It's somewhere between like Greece and Turkey. It's an island, Cyprus, I think maybe it was. The island of Cyprus. And there was a disagreement between the Greeks and the Turks. And so they ended up having a battle. And after the battle, they created kind of like this demilitarized zone on this island. Mm-hmm. And this used to be like, this was the tropical place to go. All your celebrities would go there before the war. Mm-hmm. And this demilitarized zone has been off limits apparently for the last 40 years. Like nobody's allowed in. So you have this city that was once a thriving city that everybody left because of the war, and then it's been empty for 40 years. And apparently they just opened it up recently. And it was interesting because they found the gentleman that was doing this little documentary, if you will, it was a short, like 15-minute video, found a gentleman that actually lived there. And then, so he was the grandfather that lived there. He grew up, lived there in this demilitarized zone. He lived there before it was demilitarized, but then his son was born there. And then that son had a son. So you've got grandpa, father, and then son. You've got 3 generations, and they were able to go back in, and the guy was able to see his house that he built himself. His son was born there. And then I think his son was like 8 or 10 when everything happened. And so they had to leave. So it was kind of interesting just seeing, how much gratitude that the individual had. For him, it was very emotional for the grandfather to be able to go back and see what was once his daily life.
Interesting.
So, yeah, it's all about perspective, I guess. All about perspective.
Well, I guess it's the little things, although when it comes to family and ancestral, it seems little, and it's sometimes almost everything inside of us, just depending.
Right. Yeah.
But that sounds very cool.
Yeah, it was.
I was watching Squid Games instead, much more productive.
Apparently, white. It was at Converse. I forget if they were wearing Converse, but apparently white Converse or white whatever shoes.
It's like Vans or something.
Or Vans.
The more like the slip-on. I don't think they have the Van
Vans
branding, but it's got like the white slip-ons.
Yep.
Yeah.
Apparently, those sales have gone through the roof. So if you're looking for those, they're probably sold out. And then the color teal has exploded in popularity. So it must be I haven't seen it yet, but I'm imagining, since all these things are exploding in sales, that it must be a really warm, uplifting, just down home family type of movie that it's not.
Yeah, well, in a way, it's like it makes you appreciate all those things because it's the exact opposite, probably.
Yeah.
But I have to say, I think it's highly addicting if you like it. Like, I don't usually binge watch stuff, and I don't usually just keep watching things, but this one was compelling. I think it was like doing Squid Games on my dopamine centers or something without me knowing.
I might have to check it out. I have an issue with English when they do English voiceovers. It's something about it just annoys me. So I started watching, and then I was like, in 5 minutes I was out. I would much rather watch Hidden Dragon or
Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Yes, thank you. I'd rather watch that with the subtitles. Even though it's very distracting because you got all this great martial arts going on, and here I am reading subtitles, and it's like, okay, what's going on? But for some reason in my system, the English voiceover stuff I have a hard time with. I have to say, I found it is distracting for me too. I would prefer to read subtitles as well, but what can you do? Yeah. But yeah, it seems to be quite the hit. The closest I've come to actually watching it, SNL did a skit on it last Saturday night, so I watched their skit, and it was pretty funny because it was kind of done to a country song theme.
Hmm.
So yeah. But anyway, um, what should we talk about today? We have a topic.
We found a topic.
We found a
Look at
topic.
us.
It found us.
Success. Yeah. That's probably a truer way of how it works. Yeah.
Yeah.
We take the credit for things that actually found us.
Yes, for sure.
So I think we're talking a bit about the unconscious, or the great, yeah,
unconscious decision maker.
Exactly.
Dun dun dun. It's
the great unconscious, shadowy thing that drives our lives potentially.
Yeah, it's just the Wizard of Oz, right? It's this great being.
That's a perfect analogy, actually.
Yeah, how so?
Yeah. Well, it feels all powerful and all consuming, and like shows up way bigger than it is. And at the end of the day, it's kind of just this like thing that's not that different from us, and actually like is not all that bad. It just kind of was pretending to be scary and
Right.
omnipresent and omnipowerful, if that's even a word. I don't know if that's a word, but
yeah.
But it is when we pull behind the curtain, you find that maybe there is something inside of us that's been there the whole time. Is that something like that from The Wizard of Oz?
Yeah. No, I like it, and the fact that, and I like the omnipresent, omnipowerful. You know, the what I think you're, trying to come across with, that it's just, especially when you get in your own mind, it's kind of like it's all encompassing. It's always there. And it's interesting because I think there's just a misunderstanding, there's a misconception, there's a disconnect on what the unconscious is, and who's really making decisions in our lives as we go through the day. Am I consciously making the decisions? There are things I'd like to think that I am. However, as we repeat patterns of things that we don't want to do, or we're not able to achieve the things that we do want to do, and those patterns show up, that's kind of that where I think of that great unconscious decision maker kind of shows up. It's kind of behind the scenes. We're not even aware that it's working, and yet it's working 24/7. May I be the cliche, 365.
Yeah, and there's so much to this. It's like, I don't even know where to begin. I think the biggest problem with it is,
at the beginning.
We're all a system, and the problem with this system, sometimes, if there is one, is that it walls itself off from parts of ourselves. So sometimes we don't even have, when we look out through our eyes and see what we see, and we hear what we hear with our ears, and we touch what we touch with our fingers and our bodies, and we have the emotions that we have, we just call it reality. But the way our reality is put together has a lot to do with how we perceive this information. I have a good friend, actually I have a few good friends who are either fully or partially colorblind, and I was living with one years ago, and it just kind of hit me out of nowhere, like one random like Tuesday night, that his reality was completely different than mine in a fundamental way that I actually truly couldn't wrap my head around fully, because I just have never experienced that. I'm not colorblind, so I can imagine what that's like, but I don't actually know what that's like. So the way information comes to us, and then the way our unconscious is built to process it and make meaning of it, which is really the biggest part of all this. Like, we may have no idea where that came online, what it's meant to do, and like how it's working for us.
Right.
So I
And it
guess that's a
also,
starting place.
yeah, I think there's that aspect. So that's kind of the beginning, if you will. That's the
Hmm.
where it all starts. And then I think the ending where it kind of shows up a lot of times is the old saying that it's not what happens that matters, it's the meaning that you make of it that
Hmm.
matters. And that's kind of the end result, is the meaning that we make of things. There's plenty of times where I'll use driving as an example, where it's one of those things, it's like two people, one place, and somebody, if they get in front of you, now ego gets involved because they beat me. And yet I saw them coming up, and I understand, hey, the lane's closing, they're trying to negotiate the best that they can. And yet I don't want them in front of me. So what do? I accelerate. So what do? They accelerate because they've already got the momentum to get in front of me.
Hmm.
And so then I'm frustrated, or have been frustrated in the past, where they get in front of me and it's like, damn it. So it's kind of like, well, what is the meaning that I'm making of the situation? Because I can rationalize that, hey, he wasn't being an ass, or, it wasn't, because some people are just blatantly rude. And there are situations
Yeah.
where it's kind of that 50-50. Do you go? Do you not go? Do I let this person go first? Let's all be friends and figure it out. And it's kind of like, well, hold it. You may think you have the edge on me, but I'm going to accelerate and stay in front of you. And then he still beats me. And it's like, so, why is that the meaning that's made? And we don't need to go into that, but there's a lot of different ways people could respond. You could have your typical road rage that we see on YouTube videos, because nobody makes videos of, hey, go ahead. It's, go ahead. Get in front of me. It's not an issue. That's really not fun and exciting. But the road rage ones are, more tantalizing to the human experience. So I could respond that way, or I could be like, oh yeah, go ahead. I'm going to let you in. And we don't think about all the past programming that's happened that goes into the decisions that I'm making in that moment. Why did I accelerate versus, noticing that he is coming up on me? This individual's got the ability to pass me. It's a clean pass, no big deal. So anyway, there's all kinds of stuff.
Road rage is an interesting phenomenon, right? Because it's just, I mean, we all have our triggers, and there's a lot of them, but that one kind of shares a commonality in society and gets really violent sometimes. That's why it's like,
especially in your early 20s for some reason.
I can't. I think it was a long time ago. I looked this one in particular, road rage. I'm like, why? I think I just wrote someone getting shot over like getting cut off or some road rage thing. I'm like, why does this happen? This is like the disproportion. Okay, is interesting. You have my attention now.
Right.
And I think the thing I read said that, road rage acts as like a metaphor for things in people's lives. So whatever it fills in. And I don't know if I'm sure that's one way it works, and there's many others, but it's like there's someone's cutting you off, and all of a sudden you're just like, everyone's cut me off my whole life, and I'm not going to take it anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It has that effect a little bit.
But it's that unconscious decision maker, right? That's kind of working on all the past experiences, all the way the world's done you wrong, maybe. And if you kind of see the world through that filter, talking about somebody who's colorblind or not colorblind, they see the world differently. So if your internal representation of the world is all the ways it's done you wrong, there is a good chance that the unconscious decision maker is going to say, not today, folks. You are not going to beat me. I am going to beat you. And, then you've got the other guy who's like, hey, I had a long night last night. I'm tired. I'm relaxed. I just want to get where I'm going. I am not in a rush today. Completely different mood, completely different frame of mind. And so the unconscious decision maker at that point is probably going to default to, oh yeah, here comes a guy. I'm going to slow down actually and give you more room to get in, because I'm just enjoying the cruise today. Really don't care if you want to go faster than me. And I've been on both sides of that. There are days where I am like heavily motivated. I want to get where I'm going, and I will cut you off, and I will get where I need to go because I am determined. And then there's other days I'm just like, man, I'm just gonna chill. I might even do 5 under the speed limit because I can, folks. Not to be an ass, but just because that's where my frame of mind is.
Yeah, and having lightning fast empathy is like that's a hard skill to cultivate, right? If someone cuts you off and you instantly click into, oh, they must be going through something,
right?
Either right now or their entire life, you know.
Right. Yeah.
That takes some practice to jump into on a dime. You know, you can get there with a few minutes, but instantly is a trickier one.
Yeah.
And that's I don't know. I don't know what's coin. I am what you'd call a really, really, really boring driver. I don't like any thrills on the road personally.
Okay. See, I enjoy the thrills. That's why
I don't. I'm up for controlled thrills. I would love to go like race Porsches like on a track or something, but I don't need to turn my car into Speed Racer on the highway. I just don't. I don't get any charge from it, honestly.
Right. Yeah. I am one of those where if you're not doing 5 over the speed limit, you're going too slow. That's kind of like minimal acceptable allowance on my end.
Yeah. So I drive without any shame. I drive in the slow lane, and I still,
thank you for
rock
doing
the masculinity. Yeah.
Thank you for doing that.
Cool.
Yes. I wish more people
would. And if you got a problem with it, we're probably not meant to hang around. Not you. I mean, like anyone listening,
Right. Yeah, fair enough.
If you're like, that's not masculine, I'm like, well, we're probably just built differently, and that's okay. Yeah. That's all right.
That's all right, folks. That's all right. So the great unconscious decision maker is, do we just boil it down to the critter brain and survival? Is it that black and white where it's just all about survival? Things that the critter brain has deemed survivable will always be sought after and have more value because it knows it's survivable.
I think if we want to get overly simplistic, I think everything nets down to either survival or love and loyalty to where we come from. I think that's probably those two things are a simplistic way of netting it down.
Right. And
either trying loyalty, to keep you alive,
love and loyalty being kind of like
too.
Belonging.
Love, loyalty, and belonging with family of origin and ancestry, which at the net of that is also survival for a 1-year-old to 6-year-old kid. So maybe that's even not the most simplistic thing, but where our unconscious decision maker comes online is the culmination of all the experiences and the decisions we've made from the experiences that we've had, and also our inherited ancestral, I don't know what you want to call it, trauma. Some people call it that way. Family soul, ancestral payload. I kind of like, although no one says that.
I haven't heard payload. I kind of like that though.
I just made it up right now. Why not?
Coin that. You better write it down.
Militarize stuff, like it's always better that way. Highly efficient.
Yep.
Even though there's like a war on war metaphors these days, which I understand. I don't agree with it completely, but I understand why people are waging war on war metaphors, which is also funny in and of itself if you think about it hard enough.
Yes. Just like other groups out there that are, well, we won't go there. That might be too politically charged.
We could be. I mean. Yeah, I think you and I talk a lot about political stuff on the back end. I think we're gonna have to bring it to the front end just for our own authenticity.
Well,
do you ever watch what was that show on CNN back in the day, like 50 like Point Counterpoint, or what was it called?
I think Counterpoint rings a bell.
It called Counterpoint?
Yeah, I've never been a
they'd have
CNN
someone on the
Fox
right
person.
and someone on the left, and they'd like make a point about, they'd have a topic for the episode, and then they'd not yell at each other like the way discourse is devolved to now, but they'd like have a point and then a counterpoint kind of thing, which I think is actually cool, except now we just sped it up so everyone just shouts instead and declares victory like
Right.
baselessly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's been interesting. It hasn't been, maybe the last 6 months I've been more politically engaged, if you will, where I've been disengaged, and not even politically, but it's more about just the way people are responding, the way people are engaging about kind of all things, you know. So may it be politics left and right, may it be, you know, we talked a little bit about the LBGTQ, and I forget all the other acronyms that go with it, with Dave Shapiro, or not Shapiro, Chappelle.
Dave Chappelle.
You know, with the Dave Chappelle show. And it's kind of interesting because it's almost like people are saying enough is enough. That it's just because you want everyone to think this way, we actually we're kind of raised in a society where we should have our own thoughts and feelings. And we don't necessarily have to agree, but there seems to be this whole unity thing going around. And I'm not sure how this ties into the great unconscious decision maker or not, because if we look at it if we kind of look at it at a bigger level, what's going on energetically with the US as an energy. So if you think of the United States as an entity, as a being, as a person, if you will, what is that
collective field or system?
Yeah, exactly. What is going on that is really saying that we all have to be equal and the same. We have to think the same way, and everybody is included. So unless, of course, you're a bigot, unless, of course, you're a racist, unless, of course, you're white, dare I say it, to some degree, then those aren't allowed. And it's like, well, hold it. I think a racist has his own points. A bigot has their own points. Doesn't mean they're right. And I'm not saying they're right. I'm just saying they have their own ideas and thoughts and feelings. And instead of trying to say that everybody needs to come together and just accept everybody, that we agree to be acceptable, but not these people. It's like, to me, it doesn't come together. It just doesn't work.
So there's a lot of validity to that, I think.
So at some point, at what point do we go, all right, I'm going to allow that person to have their own experience. I do not have to be complicit with that experience. I'm going to let them have their own experience. I'm going to focus on the experience that I would like.
Yeah, and that ties, I mean, there's so much to that. There's the surface level content of it, and then there's the psychological drivers of all of it. You showed me, and maybe we'll have to show it in a future video, you know, a little YouTube clip of with Mike Tyson on his podcast, and a young guy he's talking to. And the gist of it, maybe we'll talk about it later, the gist of this thing you showed me was, you know, Mike Tyson talks about if you can't forgive someone who hurt you, and if you can't like move past things, they control you, they own you, basically. Like, and I would apply that frame to everything. It doesn't matter what the topic is that triggers you and actually gets down into your great unconscious decision maker. The more any other person or group or idea or word like digs into you, the more it controls you, the more you are enslaved to it and powerless to it, actually. And it's all actually metaphorical, because you're actually giving, at the end of the day, net, it's how much power do you give these people and these things. They're not taking it from you. At the end of the day, how much are you giving it to it? And that's a really, really, really hard thing to wrap your head around if you're in a lot of pain, and people are in a lot of pain. And you kind of noticed, I mean, you actually remind me of something that's really important too. It's like a big part of this, the great unconscious decision maker, in addition to our familiar inheritance and our upbringing and our culture and our country, we also just have this innate, hardwired tribal thing in us. It's almost like spinal cord. Actually, it might actually literally be proven to be in like spinal cord. We just organize hierarchically, which
Right.
has also become a controversial thing these days. And I don't think it is. I think it's just observable, and
Right.
like whether you like it or not, you're going to have to deal with it.
Right.
I think that's a more powerful way to think about it. So we have almost this innate need to either like be controlled, so to speak, by people that we trust and feel we belong with, or we have to grab control and power because it's just the way humans work, because we organize in this hierarchical way. And the best people on the planet at getting control and wielding power are kids. And we were all kids. They're the most
So
like
true.
narcissistic, like power hungry, like entities
No
on the planet.
filters. Yep.
You're gonna watch a kid's gonna get what they want. They're gonna yell and they're gonna scream and they're
Right.
gonna get violent and they're
Yep.
gonna like just not stop until they
Right.
get what they want.
Yep.
And
Takes a
we
strong
were all
parent.
that one day.
Yeah. Takes a strong
takes a strong-
parent to
yeah.
resist and kind of contain
Yeah.
that, right? You know, because it's
Yeah.
really important as parents that you provide boundaries, but you know, and then it's up to each parent
Mhm.
how much room is within that boundary for learning and so on and so forth. But that's a whole nother conversation. But it is interesting how certain people who feel the world has to be this way, you know, whatever this way is, because everybody's got their own interpretation, and they get so angry when other people don't agree with them and don't belong. And it's kind of like, okay, well, what is going on in that unconscious decision maker that is making them angry? And if I'm not mistaken, you cannot be angry at something if there isn't a fear of loss. It's and I forget if it's just anger and but I believe there has to be a loss of some sort involved in order for one to be angry. And if
that sounds interesting. I know. I mean, anger serves a lot of functions.
Yeah.
Sounds like there's something like a big nugget in there. We'll have to mine for it, because I don't know off the top of my head. It's not ringing a bell, but I know anger serves a lot of functions. The main one is getting control of when of feeling out of control.
Mm-hmm.
You get angry and you take action to gain back control in your life, whether that's inside of you or outside of you.
Right.
Like the feeling of being like organizing and controlling your environment to some capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what kids are doing when they get angry, or they're trying to get a need met, like connecting with, you know, mom or dad, or getting food because they're hungry or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a weird phenomena. And I always, in my head, I'm always like, man, it's a really confusing and hard time right now. And then every time I think that, it's like the more you look at history, the more it's like, it's actually a really good time. And like, we're just more aware of some stuff because of the news and social media. But like, it was so much worse every other time in human history than it is right now. We have very real challenges, but you know, life's pretty good compared to how it was.
Sure. And I think if you go back generationally, you're always there. That's always going to be a part of the conversation, is how bad things are, how bad people are, how bad the government is, how bad the world is, how, you know, all of that. I think it's a common theme, in the sense that if you're going to be safe, you need to be aware of all the bad things that are going on. Otherwise, how do you know how to protect yourself? So again, it kind of goes back to you can't survive happiness. So you know, you'll never hear on the news how many thousands of planes landed safely today. It will never happen.
Because as you said in the beginning, it's not compelling to us, isn't that's so like that is interesting. You're like, no one films someone letting in someone cutting them off because it's not interesting. You film the fight that breaks out because that's interesting, and that's true, right?
Yep.
And it's just like a universal reason of why our function, like our brain functions that way. Why is that?
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I don't know about the fighting or the discord per se. I'm not sure what it is that the brain is why we get a dopamine hit just, even watching it.
I think there's some heightened arousal, if nothing else. It's probably,
Right.
I don't like horror movies, but I wonder why people do. And I think if nothing else, it's just a heightened state
Right.
of arousal
Makes
that's
them feel alive,
interesting.
maybe makes them feel
Yeah,
more
yeah, a
alive
little
type of
bit,
deal. Yeah.
something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
If nothing else, you know.
Right. Yeah. I had a thought and it just
Oh no. Well,
went
it's
off into the
going
ether.
back to, I don't, this sounds kind of pejorative, but when I think about what we are doing now, the stuff that you kind of referenced earlier about people being upset about this, that, or the other thing is a symptom of how good life is right now. Think like you don't have to
Mm-hmm.
worry about being killed by leaving your house the way you did in medieval times or biblical times.
Right.
So your mind is focusing in on, it's finding something to make something a problem. And I'm not saying a lot of stuff isn't real problems, but
Right.
it's not life or death most of the time the way things used to be.
Right.
So the way we're like, why is this person making this big deal about this thing that's stupid? Because it's a symptom of how good life is as an overarching statement. That's a big part of it.
Right.
And two, I think I lost number two, but
Yeah.
I think of it as like the sensitivity movement. And for me personally, this isn't just shitting on wokeness, although I'm not such a fan of that stuff usually, because I think it's disempowering. Fundamentally, it lacks empowerment, and it puts the locus of control out. It teaches people to put the locus of control in their life outside of themselves instead of inside of themselves. That would be my biggest gripe with it. But I would say the sensitivity movement, I expand that way past the woke movement, because anyone who is making a career or spending their time fighting the woke movement or complaining about it is also in the sensitivity movement, in my opinion. It's like everyone's being sensitive about everything these days.
Right.
And it's a symptom of how good life is, and it's also indicative of how human brains work.
Right.
And it's also a bigger symptom of the most important thing, at the heart of why we kind of got together to do this show. I think what we want to do is like foster people being more authentic in themselves and being leaders in their own lives, not necessarily of anything other than their own consciousness. I think if people spend a lot of time pointing the finger at something else, they've disowned responsibility inside of themselves and chosen like righteous emotions to help avoid pain inside themselves.
Right.
That might, that's always true to a certain extent. Either it might be a little bit or a lot bit, depending on the person or the thing. But
Right.
when you don't have, how should I explain this? A relationship where you're fighting with your ex and you think about them all the time is not over. You still want them, you still think about them, they're still compelling to your consciousness. You're over your ex when there's no charge left anymore.
Right.
And that's power. If you're angry at your ex and it's ruining your life in your own mind and they're not even around you, as an example, they're controlling you and you're allowing them to control you. Well, and it's complicated because that can be hard to extinguish. That is, I'm just saying, you can't just be like, well, stop it. That's not enough to change these things sometimes.
Come on.
But fundamentally, that is the structure of it. Yeah.
Right.
Like, well, have you ever thought about knocking it off? Come on. It's not that simple. But
sure. And I think sometimes it is a matter of being able to go through the process, maybe grieving as an example. If you need to go through that grieving process instead of resisting that, is allow yourself to go through the emotions that you just need, that the body is designed. There is a design. There is a If the body was a game, there's an XY up down space control jump sequence that you need to go through in order to have the experience that you need to have. And I think a lot of times we resist that for whatever reason. Sometimes it might, having the pain just feels good, because we feel there's maybe nothing else available. And so, kind of like watching horror movies, the pain actually shows that I'm alive. It allows me to feel something versus feel nothing at all. Maybe it's not exactly like the horror movies, because that's more of an arousal, but that feeling alive type of experience can be.
Yeah, humans can bear almost anything. One of the things that's unbearable to humans is feeling nothing.
Yeah.
That's strange. Feeling empty and feeling nothing is much more a reason why people end their lives than being completely overwhelmed with life, although that is a reason too. Right. But yeah, I mean, again, people would rather be in pain than be nothing. And that's a weird concept, but it's true.
Yeah. And it's interesting because this is all happening unconsciously for the most part. I mean, we consciously feel it, but the driving force, the operating system that's in the background that's producing these feelings and these emotions, and just kind of everything that's going on is happening unconsciously. And like you were saying earlier, if you turn outwards, you're also not able to see inwards as to what's going on with you. So without really just slowing down and being able to take status of what's going on internally and what those expressions are coming from, it's really difficult to make any change, because these are things that we respond to generally. I think most humans know to respond to it, but they don't necessarily know to actually step into those feelings, to lean into those feelings and really identify where are they coming from and why are they important in the system. Because if they didn't show up in the system, if the anger didn't show up, if the hatred, all the range of emotions, including happiness and joy, if those don't show up in the system, then they don't have meaning. So the simple fact that they show up in your system means they have meaning. Doesn't have to logically make sense. But it's just having that awareness that they're there because they have meanings for the system.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And the meaning is where we get the run code, the operations for what emotions to feel and release. It's like that paleo mammalian part of our brain that pushes out all the chemicals that have us feel emotions. It's like, all right, someone cut me off in traffic. Whatever it is inside of you, your brain's like, all right, let's we're pushing these emotions there. And then once the emotions color you, like, rationality usually flies out the window most of the time, unless you can kind of breathe through it and calm yourself down and know that that state will pass. Like, no wave lasts forever. That's a really important thing to keep in mind. Although when you're in a huge wave, it can be impossible to keep that in mind sometimes. We have the infinite capacity to fool ourselves. I really believe that. And that is a scary thought. A lot of people don't like that thought. I think it's empowering to keep that in mind, because a lot of us have, Carl Jung talks a lot about shadow side, like, kind of, we have this shadowy part of ourselves, our capacity to do horrible things, disowned parts of us, things we're unwilling to be or do or have. Like, we all have, how should I put it? The spiritual frame that it's like, you are all things, is kind of how I look at life and people. It's like, everything is everything. And that's a more true way to look at ourselves. And if that's accurate, like, the drivers about why we do things might not be known to us, because it might be kind of sealed off a bit, and we might have to explore and dig to figure that out inside of ourselves.
Right.
And I think one, it's terrifying and painful. That's the reason people don't do it. And two, it's not instantly gratifying. It can be, but it's like
Right.
sometimes you have to dig for years, just to be
Right.
honest. And
Yep.
I don't think there's anything more important that a human being can do. So I think people should dig for years. I think you should dig forever and
Right.
like understand yourself at a deeper level forever and build yourself up and actualize forever. I don't think there's anything more important for human beings to do than
Mhm.
that, but it's not easy
Right.
necessarily.
Yeah.
But we probably
And I think
didn't come
it's
here
like
for
a
an easy
muscle.
time.
Yeah, and I think
Mhm.
it's like a muscle. It's one of those things that it's important to work out. Does it need to be worked out every day per se? Hey, there might be times where, okay, yeah, you're going through something. You're going to have to work it a little bit harder in the moment. But in life in general, find that balance.
Yeah.
It's kind of like going to the gym. You don't need to live in the gym in order to be fit. Find that balance. And so spending that time, even simple yoga, there's, part of the yoga philosophy, if you will, is kind of just relaxing, slowing down, noticing what your body feels like, what's going on. And just a
Mhm.
simple thing like that is a nice, because without awareness, it's really hard to know, well, where do I need the focus?
Yeah.
And yeah, so just slowing down. I almost feel like we need, and I cannot think of the producer, but back in the 70s, Burt Reynolds did a skit with a very famous producer who ended up marrying his the person that watched his kids. He's kind of a quirky little guy. But anyway, they did this and it was
Mhm.
all about the male orgasm. And what they did is they had control center, which was the brain. And so they had kind of like a space station layout. It was all white. And so, you got the commander going, okay, guys, tell me what's going on. And then you would see the skit on the outside, and it's a guy looking at a girl and they're having conversation at dinner. And then it's like, okay, heart and respiration, what's going on? And, so you got this command center having this communication. And then as the night evolves, they're kind of like, oh, hey, we need to get ready. Okay. The guy, and I don't know what they called it, but basically the guys in the penis, you guys need to line up and get ready. And so then you go down there and they're like, oh my God, I'm so excited. I have no idea what's going to happen, but it's going to be great. And the guy and the girl in the skit, they end up going home and they start kissing. And he's like, okay, perspiration. Let's get the perspiration going. All right, heavy breathing. Let's start breathing heavy. Come on, let's get that pulse rate up. So you got this whole command center, but it's talking to all the different parts of the body, taking in
Mhm.
information, giving out instructions. It would be interesting. And this was a comical skit because at the end, all the guys down below run out of this white tube and they jump out the end and they like
Mhm.
have parachutes open up and they're all, whoa, I'm gonna be first and all this stuff. It's funny. Um, but I'm like, oh, from a mind point of view, it'd be really interesting to kind of do that skit. May it be um the way things repeat in life. So finding that pattern and then playing that skit and kind of
Mhm.
what are all the different communications that the brain's having that people aren't aware of. And,
Yeah.
checking in with the unconscious, subconscious mind. What's the critter brain thinking about this? Because the critter brain don't think. It's like, "Ruh, ruh." It's very non-binary. It is survivable, not survivable, and then you got to check the archives because of all the ages that we've lived. We got to check the archives to check
Yeah.
against, is this going to go? And there's all this great stuff that's going on unconsciously that we have no idea. Probably trillions of transactions or data transfers per second. Um, you know, just it's an amazing thing, and it would be interesting converting that into a visual story somehow, where
I
people could
agree.
actually.
It's kind of like that Pixar movie, I forget, where they have the emotions like in the control
Oh
center.
yeah, that was
Yeah. It-
Soul.
no, it wasn't Soul. I remember I haven't seen that, but I remember you
Oh,
talking
you
about
got to see
that.
that
That's
one.
the I don't. It came out a few years ago. I don't remember what it
Okay.
was called, but they have like anger and like
Right.
six different emotions or something, and they all
Yeah.
sit in the control center in your mind.
Right.
And
Yes, that
it's a
was
bit
funny.
simplistic to be accurate, but the gist of it is,
Right.
kind of the gist of how this goes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
So I
there's
mean,
go
go
ahead.
ahead, go ahead. Well, I mean, there's a lot to this. The more we talk about it, the more I'm like, oh yeah, and that's part of it. So we have like our automatic processes, our nervous system, and our heartbeat, blood pressure, respiration. That all
Right.
happens without us having to consciously think about it, which is a good thing. We have our inherited experience and our actual experience of our families and our lives, and we have the system we live in called like maybe your country of origin and maybe the country you're in now. And then there's more abstract concepts that when I lean into them, they're more very useful, although they're hard to explain. Stuff that comes from Carl Jung, like collective unconscious and collective consciousness, these kind of thought form or energy field kind of ideas that we're influenced by and participate in. I think that
Hmm.
explains a lot about how certain parts are the way they are and other parts of the world are different, and how does that get organized naturally, and how do we influence each other even if remotely, even if we're not right next
Right.
to each other, all that. I don't I can't prove it. Well, I can't prove it, but it's like when you were talking about America earlier, I feel there's like it seems like people are trying to divide and like chop up things, and like the system's like multiplying itself or walling itself
Mm.
off in certain ways, like trying to not unify or and like within a unified field, which is a really weird experience. And when I step into it, I can kind of feel it inside of myself. But
Hmm.
a couple weeks ago, and I don't remember her name, but it was in the news. The top Russian advisor to President Trump testified for some reason, and there was just a quote that she made that caught my attention. She said, among other things, about her experience of the president and his like relationship with Russia and all this stuff.
Hmm.
She said America's already in a cold war with itself, and I think that sums it up really well.
Yeah.
Um, which is a very strange experience, and maybe it's been true our entire lives. Maybe it's been true since the inception, and just been cold since the Civil War. I don't know, but
Right. Well, and is
but
it
we're
is it
but we're
part of the
influenced by
evolution?
that too, even if we're not aware of it. That's part of our unconscious drivers as well. It might
Right.
not affect our daily lives very much, but it absolutely is weighing on every American, if not other people in the
Sure.
world as well, I
Yeah.
think, in this
Yeah.
kind of collective unconscious kind of way.
Right. And it's interesting because I cannot think of any society or culture that has not gone through a major upheaval. I mean, Romans are kind
Mhm.
of the atypical example of a great empire that ended up collapsing, and Rome is still around. It's not the same as it was. You look at Great Britain and how much that they were able to control, and um, what the
Yeah.
size of that country is, and what Japan was able to do during, and even
Mhm.
Germany, what
Yeah.
they were able to do during World War II is just staggering based on the size of the country and how many people they were able to affect. So, these are
Totally.
countries, you take Japan as an example, you go back a few generations, and there were people that would never buy a Japanese car, right? It's
Hmm.
like, Japan made trinkets, they made crap, they made garbage. Initially, they made little tin toys. They were not known for quality, and it wasn't until
Mhm.
after World War II where we actually went in and kind of helped them out rebuild, that they really became a powerhouse, especially in the manufacturing industry. But it's interesting,
Yeah.
imagine being Japan at the end of World War II. What You know, what was that like for those people that had to live through those times, especially considering how disgraceful it was to lose in Japanese culture, and then where they are today. You know, and Japan still got issues, you know, but they're in a much better place, kind of like what you were saying. You know, we're in the best time. When you look at the world history, we are living in the best times. So it's kind of interesting. I love the comment that you made earlier that it's because it's indicative that we're so frustrated. It wasn't frustration, but essentially that we're so frustrated because times are so good. You know?
Well, it's like if we have patterning in our minds to a certain degree, everyone, I think minds are designed, like by design, literally, to look for threats and problems and like before they happen. Some people don't do that at all, even though it's probably in them. Some people do that way too much, and that causes chaos in, you know, their own lives and the people around them to a certain degree. But we're wired to stay safe, and since we're, as a general statement, so safe, our brains are kind of like, you know, we're torn apart by the existential now, where it's a privilege to say, what should I do with my life? Like, people don't think about that very much. That's like, we just take that for granted now. Like, you didn't have that space all that long ago. Like, that's a new phenomenon. What's the purpose? What's my purpose here? What shall I do? And that tears people apart in a different way than being physically torn apart. You know, it's a very contending with that's very difficult.
Versus living in an environment where it's all about survival. I got to make sure I collect food. I got to make sure I kill the animal. I got to make sure I build a fire. I got to make sure I have protection from the elements.
What do you mean purpose? We have to go hunting. We have to go get water every day. What do you?
Well, I think the purpose was very clear. It literally was survival, right? It literally was survival, folks.
So the fact that we can sit around and like be offended about something, and I'm not saying stuff's not offensive, and I'm not saying there aren't problems, but I'm saying the fact that people are making it's like this group or this person hurt my feelings, we need to stop this, is in and of itself indicative of progress. And people would argue, well, the next evolution in progress is doing this thing, and well, maybe yes, maybe no. I don't think the answer to people living better, happier, more empowered lives is focusing on changing other people. It just fundamentally, that's not how it's going to happen. It's a nice fantasy, and it's a nice way of putting the agency of our own lives in other people's hands, because that's easier. But
if everybody lived like me, the world would be a much better place. If they just listened to my music, if they drove at the speed that I wanted to, ate the food that I eat when I eat it, wanted to talk about the things that I want to talk about, life would be grand. Although it might get boring after a while, but it would be fucking awesome. So
yeah, exactly. That's not true at all, except if we were all like you, then it would, that's the one exception.
That's the one exception. Like, what's wrong with the other 4 billion people? I just don't get it. Come on, people.
And that's the thing. Everyone's doing that to some degree, whether they express it inwardly or outwardly. And it's like, so I think there's people pointing the finger at, like, I'll just use wokeness because it's easier right now. People are like, they're being sensitive and they're wrong, and not owning up to the fact that they're doing the same thing with different criteria and different rationalities. And it's just like, it's a mess.
All right. Well, it's kind of like, I've got his name here. Jordan, I think it's Jordan Peterson, talks to people who, like, the 1%ers, like, oh, the 1%ers, they're evil. They've taken over the world and blah, blah, blah. And his response is, I believe it's 32,000. I'm not sure when this number was created, so I don't know if it's still accurate. But if you earn over $32,000 a year globally, you are part of the 1%.
uh,
And so
I
does
hadn't heard
that
that.
change your perspective on things?
Hmm.
Or is it, well, no, I don't care about the world. I just care about where I live in the United States. And
Hmm.
because I make $100,000 a year, everybody else who makes more money than me, a lot more money than me, is horrible. And it would be curious
Yeah.
talking to those people, because then if they look down the line and go, okay, people that don't make any money and are potentially living on the street, do they have problems also? Where,
Yeah. Yeah.
the people
It's
making $20,000 are going, oh my gosh, look at these people making 100K. They've got the great life, and so it's perspective. It's always about perspective, folks.
yeah, and it's a funny dichotomy. I don't. It's where I end up mentally again is the on the other end of a profound truth is another profound truth. It's
Right.
like we're designed to categorize and other people who like there's them and there's us. Like I think there's an innate quality to that in
Right.
human beings. I think it dates back to a long, 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 long time ago and our survival and tribes and stuff like that. And like on the other end of that, we should probably not like typecast groups of people, whether it's money or race or gender or
Right.
like political
Politics even.
affiliation or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet we'll probably keep doing it
Oh, you betcha.
because it has a utility.
Well,
It has a
because
utility and it
if I state this is who I am, then I
Mhm,
belong with all of these people that state the same.
mhm,
Although I tend to lean more conservative, and I am not a conservative by any stretch of the words.
mhm,
I'm not a God fearing person, and I'm more spiritual than God fearing. Um, if somebody wants to get married, I really don't care if you're male or female or who you want to get married to. It doesn't really matter to
mhm,
me. Go do what you want. Do I want to live in a world where there actually is a world, or if it just becomes a sewer? I would rather not live in a sewer. So yeah, I want to have some protection over the environment. But I also believe that we should have some independence of ourselves, right? I don't want the government to continually adding new layers of systems and processes, and you have to do this and you have to do this, because that just becomes all weighted. And at some point, it would be nice if we allowed people to make their own decisions, again, within boundaries. Do
mhm.
we want to defund the police? No, I think that's a really bad idea. And I'm more than happy
Yeah.
for some cities to try it, and I think that's the other great thing about having diversity is like, okay, hey, if you got an idea, try it in your city. Let's see how it works out, because then we get real life examples versus theoretical
Mhm,
ideas. It's like, go try it, see what happens. Um, and then let's learn from what we learned, because there are issues, there are problems in the police. Culturally, that is a culture, and
mhm.
each department has its own culture, and there are areas that need to be addressed. But do we need to remove it? I think that would be a bad idea.
Yeah, I would say defund the police probably gets the award for the worst branding and
Yeah.
marketing campaign maybe in the history of ever. I don't know because it's like
But some people are behind it. There are some
some people
people
are
who are,
truly behind the literal interpretation of
oh
that,
yeah,
but I think a lot of
yeah.
people were not. It was I don't know. I like you fall more purple, and for our people, anyone listening outside of America, are we represent the left with blue and the right with red, and the metaphorical mix of the two with purple. That's what it
Hmm.
means in America. But um, yeah, I really case by case basis
Yeah.
on where I would fall politically on things. I just defund the police in particular, just as a sentence, I think is just funny because
Yeah.
it's like so problematic in and of itself.
It's like, have you thought this all the way through, folks?
Yeah. Yeah,
So
well, I saw it's just like it doesn't encapsulate the sentiment for most of the people behind it. It encapsulates
Yeah.
the sentiment for the most extreme people behind
Right.
it, I would say. And I mean, if anyone knows what it's like in San Francisco right now, it's like, I don't know if anyone would want to get rid of any police, because like there's weird crime in San
Mm-hmm.
Francisco right now. There's
Yeah.
smash and grabs in broad daylight happening all the time, and
Right.
weird assaults, and just like drugstores getting robbed and all kinds of stuff going on.
Yeah.
And where's that? We live in a society, people. We have to. I think it's kind of a natural human thing to where it's like if something's a little problematic or not working, to just like throw the baby out with the bathwater, which is it's kind of a lazy solution. It's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
we'll just the police have problems, let's scrap it.
Right.
That's child thinking.
Right.
Being an adult about it, saying, hey, there's problems here that are real, and they're difficult, and they're complicated, and we
Mm-hmm.
have to work on it, and it's probably going to take a while to fix it. That's like an adult perspective on
Right.
these things.
Yeah.
But
if we're adult about things, are we? It's just not going to be interesting. What are we going to have on the news?
yeah, well, this is what it net comes back to in this. We're talking about groups now, but groups always drive back to individuals. You have to keep
Right.
that in mind. And it's like, if you want to spend your life pointing the finger at something and someone else, that says a really important stuff about you. And it's really
Right.
important. It's a rich source of information for a path to your own empowerment and enjoyment of life and happiness, in knowing that you can't live a happy life feeling out of control at the effect of someone or something
Mm-hmm.
like outside of yourself, just being like righteously correct in relation to that.
Right.
That's not a consciousness, that's not a personality, that's not a happy way of being. It's a way
Right.
of going through life. But it's kind of like going through life eating junk food and ice cream all day long. It's like the junk food of emotions. It's bad
Right.
for you. It
Yeah.
feels good in the moment, but it's bad
Right.
for you long
Yeah.
term.
It's a nice
That's
analogy.
really what it is. Yeah. And it's tough because, you know, some people would say yes to eating junk food and ice cream for the rest of their lives.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think on
But
that bombshell,
don't need to unpack that at all.
don't
Just
need to
ready
unpack
to.
that one. No, I'm just thinking about the ice cream I
Yeah,
have to eat tonight because we're getting new
yeah.
appliances tomorrow. So,
It's a good thing no one's watching us,
yeah.
because the hate that would come our way from this. No, I'm kidding. I don't think we've said anything all that controversial, but the
No,
fact that it is considered
we'll
controversial
we'll
is
improve on
like
it.
part of the problem.
Yes, we'll
Yeah.
improve on that.
Well, I'm not looking to be a firebrand. I'm just looking
No,
to be myself, man.
there you
Some
go.
people make
You
whole
do it well.
careers out of putting their fingers in people's chests. I think that's
Yeah.
a symptom of disorder inside of them, personally.
Right. Right.
And some
Yeah.
of the most famous and revered people do that. You know, I don't. It's like cultivating attention doesn't make anything better inside of yourself. It's a trick that you think it does, and
Yeah.
a lot of people think that, you know, money or attention makes things better internally, and it doesn't.
Right.
Maybe it
Yeah.
works like junk food or
Well, and
patchwork
it's
again, but
yeah, and obviously there could be some survival cues for the attention, right? In order to
Mhm.
survive, I got to have attention for whatever reason. So,
Yeah.
yeah. All right. Yeah, we'll see if we can get more. We don't need that, we don't need to go off the rails, but I think we can talk about real world events that are going on and then bringing it back to, okay, what is it that you really want? And I think, for me, it's about the distraction. For me, I see a lot of stuff that's going on. It's a distraction. It's a distraction. So, how do we become aware of the distraction, and then do we want to fall into the distraction and consume more of that distraction, or do we want to kind of let's notice what's going on, and then what is it that you would like? What kind of life? Where do you want your ripple in the pond? what is it that you want that ripple to be in the pond?
A family friend said something to me when I was a kid, and it just was so profound for me in the moment that it stuck with me. I don't remember what we were talking about. I think it was a friend's dad, and I was talking to him maybe about a problem or something that I was having or something going on. Well, I don't think it was important, I was a kid. And he said,
Right.
the farther you get outside of you, the less real it is, or the more of an illusion that it is. It's like the only thing that's real for you is inside of you. And the
Right.
way you kind of perceive the world and receive the world around you has everything to do with you and not much to do with everyone else.
Right.
And the more you shift, and you probably had this experience, and this is a big frame, but I think this gets to the heart of what I say. It's like, please don't make a career out of just being righteously angry about some issue or at some group or about some political party or topic.
Right.
Like, that's outside of you. That's not real. Like, notice what's inside of you that drives your attention to go like constantly focus on these things. And if you change those, your world changes, and you'll just find that it's different. When it's different in you, it's just different in the world. And
Right.
I know that's a big statement, but it's harder to say any other way than just like that.
Yeah. No,
And that's where, like, I don't like the like personal responsibility, that kind of has a political connotation these days, but we have to be responsible for ourselves. No one else is going to do it for us, because it's literally not possible. We have to do it for ourselves. And like, nothing could be more empowering or important than noticing that in our lives, and then actually showing up for ourselves and creating the lives that we want for ourselves.
Yeah.
And knowing what that truly is, not in some reaction to a thing outside of ourselves. It's like, well, screw this, I'll never be this way, and I'm going to do this because you're this way. That's not true authenticity. That's not coming from the depths inside you. That's coming from like emotional ping pong inside your mind that feels real, but it's like, it's more animal than like the loving human that you came here to be.
Right.
This stuff's complicated.
Very well said.
I think what I just said is a lifetime endeavor potentially. So, but sign up for it.
We'll continue to endeavor down that road. All righty, sir. Well, as always, I appreciate the conversation, and looking forward to having another conversation next week, Tuesday at 10:15 a.m. on both the Facebook and the YouTube. Any parting words? Otherwise, I'm going to crank up the music.
I like it when the music gets cranked up. I don't know. I think today we kind of meandered through. I think we bit off more than we could chew. That's how I would sum up. I'm like, we tried to sum up the whole.
We should have just called it
the human unconsciousness. Like,
there's
so much to it.
Instead of calling it the great unconscious decision, we should have just called it the unconscious decision maker. If we would remove the great, it would have been so much easier.
So, that is a great point. But this is life.
This is life, and this is our show. So we get to talk what we want to talk about. Damn it! All right.